programs, medicine, education. Now, this is something that our international partners are helping out with. And over the previous 2.5 years, thanks to the president, thanks to the work of the parliament and the government, we managed to acquire over 100 billion US dollars from our partners. We highly appreciate the support of these partners. Now, that allowed us to do all the payments timely, to provide all the social support and benefits we're supposed to provide. Now we have a critical need to gather additional funds to support our security and defense. We're talking about hundreds of billions of hryvnia, and we already submitted amendments to the parliament for a total amount of 500 million hryvnia. That is to pay the salary of our military personnel, and their number is increasing. We need to procure the equipment. We need to fund the Ukrainian defense industry. Now, where do we search for this additional money? First and foremost is the increase of internal loans. Our market is ready for that. The National Bank of Ukraine is also ready. We had some preliminary negotiations, and we can see some potential by the end of the year. Second is increase the tax rate for the bank income, then increase the military tax for certain categories and cases, and there will be a principle of whether you fight or you work, and there will be a number of activities made to de-shadow the labor market, and that would increase the number of job opportunities and will provide more money for the budget. So these are the 4 steps that we're working on. Now, as for the income for the civilian part of the budget, we work on a daily basis with our partners. Now, this year, we know where do we get the money. As for the next year, we still need to find additional 15 billion US dollars, and we're working on a number of scenarios, including the use of the frozen Russian assets. We understand how to proceed with that. Our goal is to receive all 300 billion US dollars of frozen Russian assets, and currently we're working on receiving 50 billion US dollars as the first contribution from our partners, with due account to the future seizure of all the Russian frozen assets. The second challenge is the energy sector. The key task is to survive the next winter, to ensure the energy supply to the critical infrastructure, to people in our economy. There's a couple of major operations we need to do: repairs, reconstruction, distribution, once again reconstruction. We're doing that after every single shelling made by the Russians, and billions of hryvnia are being spent. The equipment is imported to Ukraine. There's a coordination, and I'm not going to give you any details on that. Then the decentralized generation for the businesses. This is a new program, and the large enterprises, including large public enterprises, are developing additional kind of small generation facilities. Let them call it like a made capacity generating facilities. That's not a public information, but some major steps have already been done, and we've abolished the taxes and the custom fees and Levine taxes in order to ensure this decentralized generation facilities to be elaborated. And a number of other steps were made to reinvigorate this market so that we would be able to get additional generation sources by the end of this year. The third vector of the work is the decentralized generation capacities for the population. There will be possibilities for households, for the communal enterprises. They will be able to get reduced taxing and loan programs, grant programs. They might be using that in order to establish their own generation or distribution facilities. Now, I'm not going to give you any details, but there is a very interesting possibilities for the households and for the people. They can be creating any independent generation sources, independent from the state. What's most important is the energy system remains integral. We are preparing for the winter. We are fulfilling all the objectives. Third is the path towards the EU and NATO. There's a decision on the start of the negotiations. That's with the EU. Now we do the screening. That's the analysis of our legislation. And the key objective, the key ambition for now, that is the beginning of the second half year of next year. That's when Poland will be taking the chairmanship. We want to move over all the directions. We want to fulfill our homework in a very fast manner, just as we've done with all the previous steps. And I would like to extend words of gratitude to the President, Parliament, and members of the government, and they achieved some incredible results in terms of our Euro-integrational and Euro-Atlantic steps. And in fact, over a short period of time, we have received a candidate status. We have initiated the negotiation proceedings with the EU, and I'm confident that we'll be able to cover this screening and negotiation stages very fast. In terms of Euro-Atlantic integration, we've done some very significant and strong steps, and the previous NATO summit clearly showed and documented the inadvertent process of Ukraine's getting membership. And the president has worked a lot. The Ukrainian government authorities have worked a lot in support of that. So already there's some historic steps made for our country, and they're irreversible, they're very significant and strong, and they will get some result for us. We have an ambitious objective. We want to be technically prepared for membership in the EU and NATO right after our victory. We have a new team, we have the plans for the negotiation, we have the support of the partners. We want to do that fast. We believe that the EU accession should be one of the preconditions for the fair peace, because not a single direction, not a single aspect will be a priority one, because we're working on all of them, and we have proven over the past 2.5 years that we can overcome the barriers and achieve the unachievable. So we'll move on as a single team of Ukrainians, together with our partners, whom we are significantly grateful for their support, and we are confident of our victory. Glory to Ukraine. Prime Minister, thank you for informing us on the state of affairs in the country. And what you've mentioned, we're expecting 50 billion out of 300 billions of seized Russian assets. When can we receive this money? And the other important question, a short one. What about the production of our own weapons and equipment? The president mentioned that, but do we have the money to produce that in the capacities we require? Well, the first tranche of $50 billion, that's already a decision has been made by the G7 country leaders. Already a decision has been made to provide us by the end of this year. So these are $50 billion. Ukraine should be receiving that no later than the end of this year. So they will be unconditional, and they will not increase the state loan. That is the kind of requirements mentioned by the IMF. So we'll be using those money for any needs that Ukraine has. Primarily, these are the money used to reimburse some of the damages caused by our civilians, because these are the Russian assets, so we'll be using them as agreed to reimburse the damages caused to our civilians. And also we can use this money to compensate the budget deficit and to use them for security and defense, meaning the procurement of any military equipment or fund any needs of our defense forces. So these are political framework that we work on. That's a difficult task. The G7 countries and the EU should reach a consensus on how to provide this money to Ukraine. They shall be compensated by the assets of the Russian seized assets for the total amount of 300 billion. And we understand that 3 3 to 4 billion US dollars will be received as income to the partners, and we will use them to cover the grant that will be provided to Ukraine that we're expecting to receive by the end of this year. That's primarily. And after we will reach this objective, when we will seize all the Russian assets, if this will going to happen sooner than we're expecting, and hopefully this will be happen sooner, then we'll compensate the partners the grant, and we'll get the remaining amount, that is the 300 billion that we're expecting to receive as the compensation. The third part, as for our defense industry, indeed, we have increased the defense capacity twofold, threefold. In certain cases, we can see how many drones are being produced by Ukraine. Many of our producers have 98% of localization, so we're producing everything, starting from the boards to spare parts, and only a small part is being procured from our partners. This is a significant result. This is the market that we established, the drone market that we established after the beginning of the full-scale invasion. We are producing over 1 million drones now. So now we've opened the market for ammunition for drones. Already the appropriate legislation and resolutions have been approved by the cabinet. They allow us to develop this market. There's a special budget to support and organize the production in the military defense industry, and we also fund, together with our partners, like hundreds of billions of hryvnia, we kind of into the procurement of certain products from Ukrainian producers. We have Ukrainian weapons, Ukrainian artillery, to exclusively Ukrainian drones. There's the products presented by the President of Ukraine just recently during the celebration of the Independence Day of Ukraine. We continue this work. The Parliament and the government is working, and there's a very significant steps done by the President, who coordinates all of this work on a daily basis with our military, with our producers. And we have to say one more thing. We do pay attention to the cooperation with our partners, and today the partners, they have a profound understanding of the fact that their money are spent for the procurement of Ukrainian-produced weapons and equipment. If a year ago it was kind of impossible to imagine that the partners will be buying in Ukraine the Ukrainian-produced weapons to be used for the protection of Ukrainian sovereignty and borders. And today it's a reality. We have already the first contracts when the partners have procured the Ukrainian equipment for the armed forces of Ukraine. They continue doing that. We scaling up this program. There's several more products like military obligations that are currently issued by Ukroboronprom in order to get some money from inside of our market. This is not a loan resource. It allows us to produce the equipment, and then the partners are paying for the produced equipment. So this approach is already working. We've already implemented that. We are planning to have several additional financial instruments to have. So I can see a lot of questions. We'll start Sonia Koshkin, then Politico, and then Interfax. You mentioned that yesterday there was information that you've introduced some amendments on the resolution on increase of the taxes, and you've specified that there will be an increase of the military tax to cover 500 billion hryvnia. Would that be enough, or you're planning to have a further increase in the taxes? And just recently, Serhiy Marchenko, the Ministry of Finance of Ukraine, said that the 35 billion of additional funding are required for the next year to fund fund the budget of 2025. Now, you've mentioned 15 billion. So is that 15 billion or 35 billion of USD that you need for the next year? Okay. We have, once again, we have two baskets, the civilian and the military. As for the civilian, the need of our defense forces by the end of the year is 500 billion hryvnia. Now, in order to compensate for that need, and we can't take this money from our partners, we can get this money from inside of Ukraine, and there's four sources that I've mentioned, and we are confident that this will provide us with sufficient amount of money. Then, for the next year, we understand that we will have 50 billion USD from the seized Russian assets, and we'll be using that for the all of our needs, and they will be unconditional. So, meaning we can be using that for finding the deficit of the budget and for covering some of the needs of the defense. So, next year will cover financially, but we also understand that the current deficit of the civilian budget was $38 billion, and we know where we're getting those money till the end of this year. The next year's budget will be similarly to this year's budget, so these are kind of twin budgets, and the total need that was calculated by the Ministry of Finance is 38. Next is total deficit is 35. But out of 35, we know where to get 20 billion, because we'll have Ukraine Facility Fund, we understand the trenches, we have the IMF program, we also know how to proceed. So out of this 35, we still have 15 billion uncovered by kind of solid agreements concluded with our partners. So we understand that this is something we'll need to search from internal sources, or we would be using that out of 50 billion of seized assets, or we'll need to work with our partners to get us support in this amount of money. So that is the point. Thank you. Okay, Politico, you have the chance to ask your question. Thank you. Yesterday was a massive shelling of our energy system, and I would like to ask you about the construction of special shellings and protective ensembles, because just recently some of the government officials mentioned that the government has provided funding only for the total amount of 10%. Others are saying there's billions of debts for those who construct the production. Others are saying that you can build a protection only for the substations, and nothing will be able to protect from the Kinjal missile. So where's the current situation? What's the debt?
Yeah, actually, on the first year of the full-scale invasion, decision was made to institute 3 levels of fortifications for power generation facilities, primarily for substations that were suffering the most from Russian terrorists who tried to eliminate them. The first level was to use gabions, containers, all such other protective things to cover them from indirect impact. The second level was about fundamental reinforced concrete-made structures for transformers and other such distribution facilities within the power grid. I'm not going entirely public with all the figures and data on that, but let me tell you that as of today, okay, I'm not going to give you exact numbers, but the majority of such facilities are already ready. Maybe it begs for a, closed off-record tour for media representatives for them to see with their own eyes the completed facilities. This is the domain of Ukrenergo, the National Grid Operating Authority. National Agency for Recovery was surely involved in such activities. The government earmarked tens of billions hryvnias for that. So we intended to have first level first, then second level was to be erected to guarantee protection from drones, because power distribution facilities were most affected by those drones. By the way, yesterday we had first missile attacks, but those were different types of missiles with submunitions. Out of tens of strikes, actually, we lost a negligible number of facilities with first and second level of protection. Now, we also have test projects of third level protection measures, huge structures, like 3 football fields worth, to fully protect bigger power plants and distribution facilities. But this is really something within the, within the range of hundreds, really, billion hryvnias. A rough estimate for 6 facilities to be erected says it will cost more than 160 billion hryvnias, something unsurmountable for us at the moment. And by the way, the contractors entered the project without clear understanding of the cost of such projects and where money would have come from. Because of that, probably we have these talks about a third level and under-financing and so on. I think we have to just put the record straight, and I don't have the data exactly at my hand. I don't have any data about any arrears on that. Dear colleagues, we still have a question pending, not to rob other speakers from the time. I think you can ask for clarification during the recess. And we have Interfax Ukraine next, and then we are going for TSN 1. Maria Kalmakova, Interfax Ukraine. Prime Minister, you mentioned this fight or work principle. Could you elaborate on that? Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. Since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, Ukraine lost 3.5 million jobs. Almost 20% of our GDP was lost as a result. In order to support our military guys, we need to have at least 10 million jobs, workplaces. Meanwhile, realistically, we see, well, less than 8 million of them official ones. I mean, we do understand there's a range of professions working in shadows, not paying official taxes that are critically important for the budget today, important for our defense and security forces, our army. Because of that, this fight or work principle, this is not something new. The president initiated it the first time, and I do share it. In a country fighting for its survival, everyone has to do maximum to do he or she can. You need to fill in the budget. Yes, some might volunteer, and it's also important, but still, the key contribution to the national budget to pay salaries to our servicemen, to ensure they're well-equipped. This begs for money. And such measures would further allow creating conditions to bring our people from abroad. This is also our strategy, to have them work here, to have them pay taxes here, to support our defense and security forces. These are the principles that will be implemented together with the Parliament and the Office of the President. Thank you. 1+1. Dear Denis, 1+1 here. My question is about 2 important matters: the recovery efforts, the construction efforts. The first question concerns maternity children hospital Ohmedit. You know, it suffered horrible strike early in the month, in last month, and then we had a tender that was declared botched, and there are still plans to start the rebuilding of it, but there are no clues as to when it might happen. Another tender to mention is the one of the National Memorial Cemetery. There were money earmarked by the government. There was a certain tender that went with a certain scandal. So when it might go ahead? Okay. First part of your question, Ohmedit, the Children and Maternity Hospital. I'd like to start by thanking everyone, the Ukrainian nationals, our businesses, our partners, also from abroad, for being prompt to respond. From first minutes, people rushed to help clear the rubble, find those wounded. And it was not on anyone's mandate. People started crowdfunding on their own volition. There were 3 accounts used for that of the hospital itself, United 24, which is actually like governmental facility supported by ambassadors on initiative of the President of Ukraine, and some amount was indeed collected there. And there was Ohmedit-related charity fund that also collected some money. So this funds was the first to start. Government was not involved in that because they were like civic society organization doing their thing. It resulted in a scandal, and there was a response from the Ministry of Public Health Protection. As of the moment, we have a supervisory board of 15 members. Of them, 7 represent international donors who effectively donated for the recovery of the hospital. On behalf of the EU, we have a special envoy from the Embassy of Lithuania, a representative of Denmark, others, and we have 8 representatives of the civic society, patients' organizations, CSOs. I would not give you the complete list of names, but it was done on initiative of the ministry together with the hospital administration. So they set up this supervisory board, and from what I know, I visited Ohmedit together with Prime Minister yesterday, and so I can tell you that at the moment they assess the scope of damage, given the complex equipment, complex HVAC systems that had been there and were destroyed subsequently. These are some serious considerations to be made within the month of this expert assessment. And after that, decisions on tenders and other such steps will be made. And now the supervisory board is working on that, and the public has complete access to the deliberations. From what I know, the supervisory board has every control over every cent collected to rebuild Ohmedit. Now, regarding National Memorial Cemetery, it was a long way for all of us. We need to hear voices of the family of the fellow countrymen, servicemen who fell on the front line. We have to be able to show our honor, our respect of these people, the fallen soldiers, the funds earmarked by the government, the projects of that cemetery. All the assessments were done as open as possible, as transparent as possible. The ensuing tender was done in a completely transparent way. From what I know, it was about a consortium of companies with an experience of certain activities. We do not have a company knowledgeable enough about building national cemeteries, military cemeteries. But you have a consortium of companies with some experience within their specific domain, and they were just winners, and the construction will start quite soon. I can expect that soon families of the fallen servicemen will be able able to give the last honors to those who fell on the fields of this war. Dear colleagues, I see more questions from you, but unfortunately we are short on time and we need to move on. The country is fighting for the just peace. We had the first peace summit on initiative of the president. So how the idea with the summit develops, what is the progress with it? Good morning, everyone. I'd like to start by thanking media representatives for your work. The Ukrainian victory and the coming of a sustainable, just peace will not be possible without our resilience. And this resilience has several dimensions to it, and it is always a teamwork. Oftentimes, it is joined by different structures, ministries, civic society organizations. I'd like to outline now some tracks carried out by the Office of the President on commission of the President of Ukraine. I will start with the peace formula. This is an idea, and I think a great success of the Ukrainian diplomacy at the time of war. Ukraine has not remained one-on-one with Russia at this time, and we need to force the Kremlin to obey the international law. This was the idea crystallized in the peace formula of President Zelensky. In a year and a half, we went through all key implementation phases, from multilateral meetings, the level of national security advisors. We had 4 of these. It started in Copenhagen, when we had more than 20 representatives, and it ended at this stage with an inauguration, first summit in Switzerland. The numbers from the event are telling. More than 100 nations and international institutions, lots of signatures under the final communique, which is a document still open for signatures. Every month, practically, we have another yet country joining the list of signatories. Yes, there are issues and matters that need the work to continue. We need to work more to have countries from the so-called Global South put the signatures under the list, under this communique. There were negotiations between President Zelensky and Indian Prime Minister also on the topic, and these are some of the biggest players that will be present at the summit, but they are yet to join the final communique. As regards the continuation of this effort, as President himself mentioned, after the end of the inauguration summit, we started working on a range of thematic conferences. We see them as certain finalization of the initial work started by working groups in Jeddah, in terms of implementation of specific steps to implement individual points. The first conference took place before 22nd of July. It was about energy safety and security. It was in a conference format. By the way, the format is as follows. We invite board group representatives, and by the way, in each working group we have Global South country representatives. In some groups there are more of them, and some less. There are more challenging points, like the one on responsibility and liability and tribunal and territorial integrity. There are things more easily understandable by these countries. I would call them simpler points, if you will, like environment protection, food safety, energy security. Still, we are talking about a great deal of countries, and I think that in a couple of months we will be through with this job, and it will result in a joint plan of peace, President Zelensky's peace formula implementation. This is, by the way, the key precondition for having the second summit, which will be about practical steps to implement the formula itself. As of now, we already have early manifestations of interest from some countries willing to host the summit. The second track I'd like to outline is about security guarantees. In spring 2022, together with Mr. Rasmussen, we started working on a document called the Kyiv Security Compact, which actually has translated in 3 framework documents already signed by Ukraine with its partners, the Vilnius Declaration of G7 to support Ukraine. The EU and 32 more countries have joined this process, and it is ongoing. Another document is a June agreement between the EU and Ukraine. And the third document is the Washington Declaration, approved by all the NATO members at the Jubilee Summit. It is important for us in terms of supporting the development of the defense sector, improving the sanction pressure. Importantly, we aim for the end objective of joining the NATO with a relevant architecture of security commitments. It all started with this Kyiv Compact. This framework agreement was further translated in a number of bilateral agreements that we continue signing with our partners. This is going on, this is happening. We now have 25 of such agreements. I think this is a whole new security ecosystem that will further transform into Ukraine's full membership in the EU and NATO. The third point is about the Congress of Local and Regional Governments with the President of Ukraine. The President of Ukraine thinks that it is local communities and regions that build the foundation of our resilience and defense. And for this to happen, we reshape this Congress to have it in an expanded format, involving local businesses and local communities.
Now, some of the most important topics that we discuss include the security, energy, IDPs, veterans policy, and the international cooperation. Now, that matter had very much attention at the most recent session of the Congress. Today we have a very clear tasks being set as to the further reinforcement of this cooperation, because this is very important. And whenever we are talking about how to preserve the support and how to not only have the support, but to have an increase in support, well, that's a matter for not only the leaders to discuss, but what we have found during the visit of the President of Ukraine to the state of Utah in the United States. So it's important that on the regional level, you also have some level of understanding. It's important to share the information. It's important to build this kind of conversations and ties in between of the cities, states, and regions of different countries. That is why this work continues. And I would like to say that another very important aspect was the second International Summit of Cities and Regions. It was also very important, and already there were representatives from 20 countries and international organizations. And there were 12 additional agreements on cooperation signed in the framework of that summit. Currently, we have something like 1,500 agreements like that. This work continues. It's important because there's multiple processes taking place in many countries. There's election, there's political processes, but the main guarantee of preserving this support is securing the support of the population. And now, in order for the population to understand what is happening on a daily basis in Ukraine, so that they would be recalled, they would know once again why we are fighting for what we are fighting, that we are fighting for the freedom and democracy not only of our country but of others as well. Now, for that to happen, we will need to work every day. Then it's a matter of investments. And that might sound strange, but still there are countries and there are businesses who are ready, even today, to invest some of their money. Now, it's important for the process to continue. The other track, and it's very painful, I guess, for all the Ukrainians, meaning the return of the deported Ukrainian children. As you know, Russia has abducted tens of thousands of Ukrainian children, and we've only managed to return only a couple of hundreds, and that's through joint efforts. And this is not because someone is not willing to do something. We do have all the support of our partners, and not only the partner countries, but even those countries who have a sort of a neutral position. But I would say there's two major reasons for having any issues about that. First is the lack of information. Currently, there's not a single institution, and as you might understand, Russia is not cooperating with anyone, so there's no a single institution who would be able to provide information where the kids are, how many kids like that are available. So it's a very complicated work which is currently done by a series of institutions, including the Ombudsman, and the partners are helping us. And the second reason is that the system of international law has no power to cover that, because unfortunately in 21st century there is not a single international organization who would know what to do. Now, that is why our response to those challenges was the action plan called Bring Kids Back Ukraine. And that kind of combines many countries, many experts, many analytical experts. It combines the state authorities of Ukraine and others. In fact, of more than 40 countries joined the coalition on the return of Ukrainian children. So altogether, the group of experts primarily, we try to come up with the mechanisms that we later provide to international organizations, and they're implemented on the basis of bilateral or multilateral agreements in order not to spoil a single day or a single hour, and to use them, in fact, effectively to return our children, because the time goes by and it's becoming more and more complicated. But imagining the feeling of those families whose children were abducted, it's incredible. It's horrible. And today, in the second part of the day, we'll have a presentation of the first, like a very important document. It's called the White Book, and it will deal with the international legal mechanisms that shall be presented together with international experts. And I believe that will be a very strong step to engage even more kind of resources to get very specific results. And the last, but not the least, track, this was mentioned by Mr. Speaker, but by the Parliament, that's the sanctions pressure. The sanctions, they are acting, that's a proven fact, but they could be far more effective, which is also a fact. And surely the sanctions has to work. They should be increased until the end of the war, until the fair peace shall be established. There should be no conversations about the easement of the sanction regime or lifting certain sanctions as long as this war continues. And I would like to say that over this period of time, our group, together with MACFOL, has issued something like 20 packages, and some of those packages have already been implemented by our partners. In certain industries, we were kind of the first one to offer some of the sanctions, and they're now being implemented, but before that they were not introduced. For example, there was a very long discussion about the sanctions against the propaganda workers or employers. As you know, propaganda is one of the sources of weapons. It's a capable one, it's a strong one, particularly today when people who are supporting the war, and we can see them, driving around the world, around Europe, it's unacceptable, really. And I can't say that all of them are being accepted by our partners like 100%, but still, a large majority of this propaganda agents are currently under sanctions, so they are unable to leave Russia and they are unable to use any property outside of the territory of Russia. But the most important is that it's really important to reduce the capacity of Russia's war machine. And for that to happen, we are searching for a variety of arguments to kind of reduce the Russia's income out of the export of oil, gas, and many other things. And I can't tell you that all of that is happening, in a flick of a tongue, but it's important that some countries who were having a neutral position in the past, or who helped Russia to circumvent the sanctions, now they are joining the sanctions process. It's a slow process. I mean, some of the global South countries who cooperated with Russia for many years, but they can tell for sure that today there is not a single country who would say that, look, we don't want to participate in that, we refuse. This process is taking place, and hopefully together with the partners, and together with all the institutions of our country, will be exerting on Russia, including via sanctions, because this is a very strong tool. And do not believe those who might be saying, those from Russian propaganda who might be saying that the Russians got used to sanctions, that they're not working. It's wrong. It's a false information. Every year it's becoming more and more difficult for Russians, and that is why today they are starting to engage the countries of the world that are, not popular, so to say. A short clarification. You've mentioned that the second summit, and we heard this from the media, so there will be a global South country in that. And we already learned that the first site, the place for the summit was kind of agreed in the cooperation, in the conversations between the president of Ukraine and Switzerland. What about the second summit? What about the place for the second summit? You're absolutely right. It was in the course of the face-to-face meeting that the president of Ukraine has agreed with the president of Switzerland on the location of the first summit. And on all these stages, we felt a very significant kind of attempts of Russia to cause us or to create any obstacles. They were calling the leaders, they were trying to use every tool available at their discretion before the first inauguration summit. So I would like to extend words of gratitude to the President of Switzerland for her bravery and for the fact that she said yes, and she did this together with Ukraine. As for the second summit, we want, and that would be, correct, for the second summit to be taking place in one of the global South countries. Saying that we have already identified the country would be wrong, because we don't have a country identified yet. What's important is to have a joint plan that we're working on, and hopefully within a short period of time we'll finalize this plan. What's important is that when I'm hearing the skepticism, that is something that I've heard since the Copenhagen, like, what if Russia will not agree? Like, what if Russia does anything else? I think it's important to think not what Russia might be doing, because, well, what the aggressor state is doing, we can all see that. What we need to do is for the majority countries of the world to be with us. Now, in what sense? So that they would be supporting this joint plan. Like, why is that? Why this summit was so much important? Because we've seen the number of countries, and that is over 100 countries, who are ready, who support the peace formula by President Zelensky, who believe that this is the foundation for this joint plan. That's important. That's very important. And why am I saying this joint plan? It's based on the peace formula, but the president keeps saying that we are ready to listen to all the responsible countries who honor our independence, our territorial integrity and our sovereignty. And I can tell you that, for example, during the very last meeting and the very last visit of Prime Minister Modi, he clearly mentioned that India never supports like any single plan or proposal that will include any compromise in terms of the territorial integrity of Ukraine. And listening to that from a member nation of BRICS is something that is very important. And I think that this context, this visits, and this very significant work of the president and his team, it clearly demonstrates a lot, because today, even the BRICS countries, or member nations who are significant players on the world country, but President Ramaphosa has already visited Ukraine together with other African leaders. The Prime Minister Modi came also. There were a number of meetings in Saudi Arabia. There were a number of meetings with President of Brazil. I'm not talking about the other countries like President of Argentina, who was attending the first summit. Now, it's important for our president, I guess, to have a meeting with the leader of China. I believe this will happen, because the declared position of China is that they have a neutral position. And we've seen the number of times or how many times the leader of Russia met the leader of China. I think for the neutral position to be neutral, I think it's important for the leaders of Ukraine and China to meet. So we hope this will take place. Dear colleagues, let's have this part of the room, Facts ICTV. I want to go back to the support of our Western partners for the next year, because Russian propaganda is saying that Germany might be reducing the financial support next year. The United States are in the election process. So what's your predictions? Can we hope for the same level of sanctions, military and financial support as we have this year, but next year? Well, thank you for your question. Look, we don't try to live by the predictions. In order to, well, for everything to be as we need to work every day. And we all have a very clear task provided by the President of Ukraine. So a whole big team, the parliament, the government, the office, everyone is working. As I've already told you, the main guarantee for not having a reduction of the support, that is the support of the population, of the citizens. You know, every country has something. It's life, and you need to kind of have a normal attitude to that. So you need, at all levels, regional level, at the level of cooperation between the officials, this work to continue. Surely, the Russian propaganda, they cannot do elsewise, but they need to talk about that, they need to intimidate people, etc. But as of today, I can tell you that even during the most recent telephone conversation of the President of Ukraine and the Federal Chancellor, the Chancellor has clearly stated that all we have agreed about, all these agreements we've reached within the frames of the security agreement will be fulfilled by Germany. But you need to support our partners as well, because everyone has their own policies, there's election process, and in certain countries. Therefore, today we are working, and surely you are aware that we are working with the headquarters of all the, with both candidates to the position of the President of the United States. But as it was during the previous periods, we are not interfering or intruding. The most important that all in the United States, and particularly two candidates, it's important for them to have a daily information about what we have, what Ukraine needs, and why today the victory of Ukraine, why today the independent and free Ukraine within the internationally identified borders lies within the national interests of the United States and some of other partners. And this is just a job. You need to do that every single day. And you shouldn't be, waiting for something to happen on itself. But instead, you need to do this work. And this is something that we are doing. So it's not about predictions, absolutely. Thank you for your question. Well, since you are started to talk about the foreign states, let us talk about Creative News. Creative News Japan, please. Please, you'll be handled the microphone now.
Thank you for having me. I'm asking about the peace formula, second peace formula. Russian representative will be invited to the next summit. And but so far, Russian side refused to, participate in this process. So, what do you think? How possible Russian representative will be in the next summit? And also, what is your opinion about the possible participation of the Russian representative to the summit? Thank you.
Дуже вам дякую. Користуючись можливістю, хотів би подякувати
Thank you. I would like to take this opportunity and extend words of gratitude to Japan, to our strong partner. We are grateful for what you're doing. And I've already kind of started talking about this, you shouldn't be thinking and you shouldn't be listening to what Russian propaganda is saying. I mean, definitely they will be criticizing from the very beginning, and they've been doing the criticizing the peace formula from the very beginning.
But for starters, I think you know that President Zelensky's peace formula, unlike other completely senseless and who knows what based on Kremlin statements. So the peace formula is 100% built on international human rights law and the UN Charter. Each point even has a UN resolution voted for it. So there is absolutely nothing that would breach the international law. Because of that, any country that respects the international law will find it really difficult to say something against this peace formula, because it will be against its own principles. Now, when a joint plan appears, and by the way, we have already 100 countries that went to the summit. I think this is the absolute minimum of the number of countries supporting that. You know, ignoring a plan signed by 100 countries, still more if there are countries like India, Saudi Arabia, China, Brazil, with their signatures there. Tell me how it will be possible, even for an aggressor state that depends a lot on many of these countries. So it's important not to think about what they have in their heads. The matter now is to continue working in this direction, to involve more countries, and this will make for a very powerful argument, you know, if this happens and when it happens. Just imagine you have a plan signed by 100 countries, and there's an invitation to the second summit for representatives of Russia, how they will be continuing with the lies we are hearing every day about them being strongly in favor of negotiations, how they will continue with the gibberish about something like agreed in Turkey, only to be ruined by someone else. The truth always find it hard to go through, but it invariably wins. I strongly believe in that. Thank you, dear colleagues. I see more and more plates of yours, but I'm the one managing the time today, so we will be moving ahead. But again, there will be a possibility for you to put your questions in the field of this event. And also, it will be possible to put your questions at the second part of this event, which will be the press conference. Now, with Mr. Yermak explaining what has been happening at the level of international level, now the topic goes about justice. Justice and bringing into responsibility those guilty of those crimes. And it's time to hear from the General Prosecutor of Ukraine, Andriy Kostin. Thank you, dear colleagues, for having come today to attend this very important discussion. It's really important that all of us are on the same page in terms of our joint efforts. Before starting my talk, I'd like to point out a very important fact that we are certain, together with the partners helping us to restore justice and responsibility for all the crimes committed by the Russian Federation against Ukrainians. This is the fact that was established at the Berlin conference. It was back in February this year. A rather challenging time for us when our armed forces were waiting for weapons, we were waiting for financial aid. There were really emotional and hard discussions about Ukraine in bad need of such assistance that would not come. And there was a convergence of ideas that the track dedicated to the restoration of justice has never, ever witnessed any, handicap, any breakdown. We were sustainably looking forward and moving forward. And it was noted by all of us then at the conference that the restoration of justice, this track, should be kind of example of our cooperation with partners, because this track to restore justice is based on shared values, the ones that each democratic society is built upon, whether in Ukraine, in our partner countries. This is why we strive for success. We fight for the success because our societies are built on those principles, not only on the battlefield, but also in courts. Restoration of justice is part and parcel of President Zelensky's peace formula, but this path towards justice is not easy or simple. It's a marathon that may be lasting for years, maybe even decades. But we are probably the first, Ukraine is the first to be able to document crimes committed in the heat, in the flame of war, during the war. And Ukraine has been bringing these cases to courts. We've documented so far 136,000 war crimes committed against Ukrainians, and this is not the finite number, because we are still not in control of some temporarily occupied territories. We were able to establish 660 suspects. It's not just about finding someone potentially delinquent, but it's also about getting evidence to confirm one's involvement in the crime. 126 Russian military criminals were sentenced by the Ukrainian courts already. We are persecuting not just the perpetrators, the performance of those crimes, the rank-and-file ones. We are also working to ascertain the chain of responsibility. More than 100 of high Russian army officers are being brought to responsibility. Even the generals. Some days ago, we were able to bring to responsibility a person from another country for aiding and abetting and contributing. I mean, a general from Iran, a high-ranking official from the Corps of Iranian Revolution Guards. It's not just about Shaheds and those drones, about delivering them. It's also about training Russian servicemen. Those trainings were held by this general on the territory of the Russian Federation and in the temporarily occupied Crimea. We are the first in the world to look and investigate crimes against environment at the time of war. We work on ecocide cases, we work on cyber crimes. No such practice was available before this war in Ukraine. We were the first to issue a suspicion in ecocides crime at the time of war. It's about neutron-producing plant in Kharkiv Institute. We were the first to initiate to motion arrest warrant against Putin issued by the ICC. Working with the ICC colleagues, chaired by Karim Khan, we were able to issue this warrant, and our cooperation continued and continues. We already have 6 standing orders for some Russian top-ranking officials. The ratification of the Rome Statute, I've been a strong supporter for it. I'd like to thank the Chair of the Parliament, the Office of the President, for helping with preparing this document, making it ready for voting in the parliament. This is very important for a country willing to actively engage the ICC. It won't be possible to do it properly without being a member of it. And we were in constant dialogue with our colleagues at the court. We assured them that there would be time when Ukraine joins. Some might say this is not a first-hand priority as of this moment, but I think it is because of lack of understanding of how important this ratification is for Ukraine. Ukraine intends to create additional mechanisms to bring to responsibility, including the one on special tribunal. And really, you cannot create a new international enforceable mechanism without having joined the existing one beforehand. From here, I say this is important for Ukraine, for its future. Now, regarding the tribunal to investigate into crimes of aggression, since the Second World War, since Nuremberg tribunals, since the tribunals in the Middle East, Ukraine is the first to bring this motion on the table, how to persecute those guilty of the crime of aggression. Without this crime of aggression, we would not have 136,000 military crimes against Ukrainian nationals and other crimes related to this war. So this is a strife not just to restore justice for the sake of the Ukrainians, or for the sake of our nation. We need to make this international tribunal a strong mechanism to prevent aggressive wars from flaring up in different other parts of the world. We suffer the most from this war, but we do not want others to suffer as much as we do. And if there are dictators somewhere worldwide willing to launch some such aggressive war, I think they are now watching very closely what we are doing with this tribunal. We also strongly aim at persecuting also Putin, because without it, the objective of this tribunal would not be complete. We strongly coordinate our position with other members of these initiative groups. This tribunal will be a mechanism completely free to define its own jurisdiction. No one will be able to somehow limit it. And I think that our powerful cooperation with partners will bring the desired result. 16 prosecutors from 6 countries, including the special prosecutor from the US, already work in The Hague, working on cases for the upcoming tribunal, so we are not wasting time. This is another example of international cooperation. The Center also sees ICC representatives joining them. My colleagues mentioned it today several times, how Ukraine has been uniting democratic societies worldwide. I think several years ago, no one could have imagined a special prosecutor from the US and ICC representatives working together within the same platform. And it's not just the one broad platform on cooperation. There's a joint investigation team. They also have MOUs signed with the US Department of Justice, and this is because of us having shared values. Last year, for the first time in the history of the United States announced the first suspicions in cases of crimes against the Ukrainians at the time of this war. Lithuania has motioned their own investigation. There will be more countries joining us. 27 countries launched their own investigations into suspected crimes committed during the time of the Russian aggression, and we do everything to have the number of these countries grow. I cannot mention it, but one global south country intends to open a criminal investigation on war crimes committed in Ukraine. It will come soon. It is not just about all types of war crimes, all war crime cases. It's also about the geography of it. Russian criminals need to understand there will be no place for them to hide in the world. We want them to perceive justice. The International Registry of Losses and Damages kick-started this year in The Hague. This will be followed by a relevant fund to be established together with our partners. By the way, this international loss registry is already accepting some first addresses from our people whose properties were destroyed or damaged during this war. And its function will spread onto other types of crimes as well. So our activities in the scope of the peace formula is about establishing a whole new structures that has never been seen in the world before. We do understand that 99% of cases will be investigated and prosecuted in Ukraine. We do have surety that Russia will be punished for this crime of aggression. It is about cooperation with the ICC. It is about special investigation commissions set up under the aegis of the UN. It's about OSCE special mechanism. We continue working with all available mechanisms and facilities to see this move for justice in a systemic way. It will also involve compensation for damages inflicted at the time of war. Our international coalition for the restoration of justice becomes ever stronger, and our key objective is to make the world a safe place with war criminals having no place to hide. Okay, thank you, Mr. General Prosecutor. Just a couple of clarifications about the Rome Statute. Yes, some of our partners seem to be puzzled with us not being a member of this document. What General Prosecution Office will gain since this document is signed? And what about candidates from Ukraine to be assigned? Well, from what I know, I might need to verify it, but I think the next coming elections will come in 2026. As regards our efforts, Ruslan mentioned already that actually 18 years ago, Ukraine recognized the authority of the Rome Statute on the territory of Ukraine, and since the start of this full-scale invasion, we further adopted some bits of legislation to amend the existing Ukrainian laws to facilitate the workings of ICC team chaired by Karim Khan here in Ukraine. So in this regard, we don't have any specific addition coming because of that for the General Prosecution Office. Well, maybe it's about access to the international compensation mechanism for cases reviewed in the ICC involving victims of torture, of sexual abuse and other such crime. There is an ICC fund to compensate such victims. We do already understand how to work with the fund, so actually I would say that legally we have been having all the tools in our hands, but it was politically important for us to join the mechanism. Okay, thank you, dear colleagues, and we are past the equator of our event, and I think we will be able to take at least one question. The suspicion to Artyom Dmitruk, an MP that fled Ukraine, was issued already after he left the country. Why so, and what happens with further investigation in the case? Thank you. It really evoked a huge uproar among the public, and I thank you for putting this question today. If you would have this question posted in, on Saturday or Sunday, sorry, I think it would not be gentlemanlike response with lots of words not to be mentioned publicly regarding that. But, about my feelings, my understanding of it, when we watch a video of our border guards using drones to track down those trying to skip the country and trying to detain.
And I thought, why in those cases they managed to succeed, and in that case that person illegally and swiftly crossed the national border. So I absolutely share the outrage. We immediately initiated the criminal proceeding from the very first moment that we learned about the illegal border crossing, when we got the information about the possible illegal crossing of the national border. Now, within the framework of this criminal proceedings, the investigator, the prosecutors are working on a daily basis. Today, in the morning, we had some investigative activities, and yesterday, because we understand that that person did not cross the border by himself. Someone helped him, and maybe there could be other officials of different agencies who helped him to cross the border. So we want to identify all of them. We want to learn the situation, how that was made possible. Currently, we identified the path. That was the part of the border with the so-called territory of Transnistria. We have certain information on the whereabouts of this person, in which country. We are currently verifying this data because according to our information, he's traveling around some countries. So we will continue to take measures to, to bring him back to Ukraine, unless he will do that voluntarily. He still have a chance to, to come to the interrogation on the Thursday and Friday. So please, the member of Parliament, if you can hear us, come to the interrogation of our investigator on Thursday and Friday. In other cases, we will be calling for court and we'll be initiating his search. And then we'll request for extradition if we'll identify the country where he is located. But I'm really outraged about this situation. But it would be unfair if I'll be outraged only about the fact that the state border guards personnel allowed that person to cross, because that's a more comprehensive question. It's a comprehensive issue of protection of our border in between of the entry-exit checkpoints. We need certain efforts exerted on that. We need additional funding, additional equipment. So since we do have a prime minister here, I think the government can also learn this aspect. We need to, ensure the proper security of the border. If the person decided to flee, and if there are ways that this person can use, that will definitely happen. I mean, that's not the only case. Just yesterday, we've mentioned another situation with another MP. His last name also starts with the letter D, and just a day before the notice of suspicion was issued to him, and it also fled abroad. There were MPs of local councils who managed to flee abroad even after the issue of suspense was given, and it's not equal to the imprisonment, because if these types of crimes did not entail the detention of this person. So if the person was provided with the notice of suspicion, as it is the usual case, there is usually another applications are provided, and he will have a notice of visiting the court hearing. So the person may flee in between of those notices. Now, And also the court might take a decision that would not provide for the imprisonment before the final court decision is made on the case. So it's important that we control the border, because the number of proceedings that we currently have is over 4,000 criminal proceedings on illegal border crossing. Just this year, we have uncovered 84 organized criminal group with over 270 people helping to illegally cross the border. This is a big challenge, and we need to solve this. We can't catch everyone, unfortunately, even though we'll try to do that. There's another element. Not all the countries, well, are helping the escapees. There are neighbors who are returning, well, those people. I mean, some of our countries that are neighbors to us in the west and in the south. And we do have a dialogue with some other countries in order to ensure the return of very escapees. Now, that would save a lot of lives, surely. I mean, if the people wouldn't be trying to, swim across the river, they wouldn't be dying. If they would be aware that they will be returned at once. This is a political matter, and we'll be trying to solve this. Just yesterday, we talked to the Ministry of Interior, and he is doing so many efforts to talk to his colleagues. That would help us a lot. But still, the physical and the technical prevention, meaning the control over the borders, now that is a priority. Surely, since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, most of the efforts were dedicated to those parts of the borders that are the riskiest ones from the standpoint of the security. But now the other parts of the border, they also require our attention. As for the notices of suspicion, with regards to these MP, there were notices of suspicion on 2 criminal proceedings. So I was expecting to have a proper proceedings being prepared, and as soon as the materials have been prepared and drafted, I have signed this notice of suspicion at once. But whenever we sign the notice of suspicion, we have to understand which evidences will be presented by the prosecutor to the court and what should be the sentence. Unfortunately, there's no microphone. As for the case on the illegal border crossing, now, as I've already mentioned, we are identifying all of those accomplices of him. And so as soon as we'll get the information, we'll share that. Okay, we have time for one short question, because already we've been working for an hour and 50 minutes, and we are out of timing. Whenever we're talking about the international law, I think the English-speaking publications should be the one to ask the question. So, Kyiv Post, please. In fact, Kyiv Post, Olena Grashdan, but I'm more interested in a question of kind of internal situation, and that would help, would have an impact on the supremacy of the law. So the politicization of the prosecutor's office is something that is very important. How are you going to reduce that? For example, there's competitions for the appointment of the heads of departments or the self-government of the prosecutors. How are you going to kind of reinforce that? Well, today, I think you might be not aware of that, but just in the morning, I made a statement on the All-Ukrainian Conference of the Prosecutors. Okay, so you don't know about this, okay. Today, we do have an All-Ukrainian Conference of the Prosecutors, and they will be selecting the new members of the Qualification Commission or Qualification Board for the prosecutors. And there's 500 delegates, and in addition to 5 representing the Office of the Prosecutor General. The other are the regional and local prosecutors. I mean, those working on the ground, so to say. So I told them about my kind of suggestions that I will do together with our partners. And the representatives of our partners are also present at this conference, and we are grateful that they've done a screening of all the candidates and they've shared with the members of the conference on their information about the possible risks of selecting this or that candidate. I mean, any negative information that has been gathered. So going back to what I've announced, I have suggested, and we will do that, the establishment of the permanent selective committee at the Prosecutor Office, Prosecutor General's office, and this will select kind of a pool of candidates for a variety of positions. This is a pilot project, so that the competition will not be conducted for a specific position, because sometimes we need to appoint very fast, and so that there will be a competition for a category of prosecutors, so that I would have a selection opportunities, and the board would have a possibility to select from. Because a good prosecutor, like a wonderful prosecutor, is not always a perfect head of the regional prosecutor's office. So we'll be inviting representatives of the partner projects for them to offer candidates into this special commission. So later on, we'll try to kind of proceed with this pilot and then scale it up. Because for me, for the Prosecutor General, it's important to have a selection of people who are trained and who have their dignity verified. Then we have a working group on the reform of the qualification board of the prosecutors. So this will be a draft law provided under the requirements of Greco. Third is the reform on the internal control. That's a general inspectorate. The general inspectorate primarily responds to any outrageous events that are taking place with the involvement of prosecutors and statistics. We, together with SAP and NABU, we've identified 8 prosecutors who were taking corruption. Over my tenure, 26 prosecutors were identified as those who take bribes. But for the General Inspectorate, not only to uncover the crimes, they will be also working on the prevention. So there'll be a prevention system so that the prosecutors might be kind of coordinating how to behave themselves professionally and in private life, because some of the prosecutors believe that they are not violating the law or their relatives not violating the law while conducting any type of civilian aspects, but that might result in outrage on the society, and it will have a hit on the reputation of the system, which is difficult to take. So the question that you mentioned on politicizing aspect, it's not the General Prosecutor's Office, it's not a political institution, but it's been working for 30 years, and it's also kind of a public agency which inherits some of the negative traits that existed before. And in our system, we also have horizontal and vertical chains of command. There are people who are trying to help one another as they move along the system. There's horizontal networks when certain people who worked before together, well, some of them are in the pretrial investigation, some of them in the prosecutor's office and state authorities, well, they try to work together. So we're trying to kind of break that, and the system opposes to that kind of new involvement. So it's important to have the support from our colleagues, from our partners, in order to take those evolutionary steps and to change our prosecutor's office to turn it into a European one. Well, we thank the Prosecutor General, and let's talk about the other path, the path for the defense industrial complex, because we talked a lot about our allies, but still, the most important ally for any nation is their own defense forces, and we need air defense, long-range weaponry, the permission to use that against the military targets on the territory of Russia, as well as the funding of our own defense system. And I would like the Minister of Defense of Ukraine to tell us all about this. Well, thank you. Greetings, and thank you once again for the question. As for the importance of the fair peace, I think the next thing after the supremacy of the law that we need is the supremacy of the international law, because we want to be an EU member nation, NATO member nation. We want to become a country that is developing. It's important to have the social respect. It's important to have the respect to the international borders of other countries, because we want to win in this war. We want to have the borders that are kind of international recognized borders. We want to continue developing, and that is why the security and development of our country is very important. As for the kind of the fairness and the fair peace, what does that mean for Ukraine? Meaning, when we'll finish with the combat operations and we'll restore our territorial integrity, as I've already said, within the international recognized borders, there should be a respect to the human's dignity and to the rights of every citizen of Ukraine. Now, in order for those main functions to be achieved, we as the security and defense forces of Ukraine, we are deterring the enemy by consolidating our defense posture, by increasing the effectiveness of our combat operations, and we're trying to kind of become more capable in different spheres in defense industry and military technologies, in the development of advanced defense systems and equipment. And for that, kind of why we are doing that? Because the aggressor understands no language, no words. He can only understand the language of force. So Russia won't be taking any other words. So a peace will only will only start to exist for the Russia when we will fight them back. They count on large-scale operations and long-term operations because they think that our partners might be changing their position, and they want to change the world order. They don't see a place for Ukraine in that order. They want to destroy the international institutions and norms that are used for some of the legislation to be based on. And Ukraine is the leading country in terms of that, because it's the only country that, deters the aggressor. And we, as the country, we try to deter the enemy not only for ourselves, but we're making sure that this enemy is not moving on to Europe and to other countries. We're fighting, and we are showing that we are a civilized country. We show the whole civilized world how the country is fighting, that defending its own citizens, who's not afraid, who's engaging its partners through international technical support, through international military support, through international military diplomacy. So how and where we get this support, we're asking the allies to provide us more equipment and, military equipment and weapons. We are asking for the permission to use Western weapons to hit enemy infrastructure on the territory of the enemy. That would allow us to reduce the combat capabilities of the aggressor and force the aggressor to retreat from our borders. Our asymmetric response to their actions is to increase our own defense capabilities in order to repel any shelling, any threat to our land. In this respect, when anyone is asking about the achievements of the Ministry of Defense for over the year, Well, first is the planning. We have developed the long-term planning in order to have a future force model for the defense forces. So that is the model that will exist even upon our accession to NATO. So we have elaborated some mid-term and short-term plans, and these plans allow us to have the defense stabilizational and offensive operations. We, as the Ministry of Defense, we cooperate with anti-core society because there were many kind of complaints with regards to procurements, logistics, orders, etc. So we created a lot of agencies working on in the field of logistics and defense procurements, meaning lethal and non-lethal. We, together with the government and the Verkhovna Rada, have invested into the defense industry, and currently we have the investments of over $7 billion US, and these investments have allowed us to get a very significant support during the times when we did not receive a military support from the other country.
In terms of military technologies, we at the ministry invested in drone, ground robot complexes. We created the National Registry of Draftees. For recruiting purpose, we launched an app called Reserve Plus, then Army Plus. And together with the Ministry for Veteran Affairs, we are going to have another one for veterans, Veteran Plus. You know, we built kilometers of different fortification structures, new strongholds and outposts. We continue refurbishing military hospitals in different cities of Ukraine. As regards diplomacy, we know how important the international military assistance is to Ukraine. We have regular meetings, Rammstein meetings with about 50 countries supporting us. We built upon coalitions to expand our capacities in a variety of directions, doing everything we can to protect our nation, our civic residents, to have our army stronger. Thank you, dear Minister. At the beginning, you mentioned just peace, and it has been mentioned throughout the day today. I think there are two things of relevance for us today. Stronger army also in the future, and support from our partners. You already explained how our military force is being developed. What is your vision of its future, and what to do with the trend with delays in munitions supplied from the partners? You don't know that we have 50+ partners who we meet with in Rammstein. Really, it's important to have this support in a timely manner. Unfortunately, not every time it really comes on time. Meanwhile, this factor is of great importance, which regularly means we are losing time. But we use all levels of it, from the President of Ukraine to the cabinet, the Verkhovna Rada. We work as a team to relay the information about needs to our partners, the need for quick solutions. To further speed it up, we invest into our defense and military production complex. We have multiple partners becoming actively involved, assisting us also financially. We encourage them to invest in the sector, and the money already being used to buy local military produce. So meetings, investments, development, and timeliness, these are the four core considerations. Thank you. And we go 2 questions. And I see wealth of tablets. Inter, please. Nina Kolomeitz, Inter TV channel. Dear Minister, can you tell us how your MOD intends to provide our veterans with long-term support already after active hostilities? You know, we started a barrierlessness or country without barrier project for veterans. We've started together with our partners a host of rehabilitation programs, also to better use their valuable experience and to further enjoy their support. We also intend to engage veterans into education activities with young people. We want them talk to the young to explain what were their feelings and principles when they made that decision to go and fight, not being pushed or coerced by anyone. And we work together with the Ministry of Veteran Affairs and the government on that. Deutsche Welle, please. Germany. Left part of the hall.
Thank you. Deutsche Welle, Germany. You have repeatedly asked your Western partners to lift restrictions on long-range weapons to hit military targets deep inside Russia. How hopeful are you to get that kind of support? What are you doing to convince them? And what else does Ukraine need in the near term from its Western partners to help defend itself? Thank you.
They say that hope dies last. So we have argumented our partners that to stop the enemy to come to our borders, to create their buffer zone, we created a buffer zone, not to allow them to enter to our borders. So we are focusing to the airfields, to the logistic hubs, and not to the places that they would be attacking us, because they are attacking with the S-300s, S-400s, and terrorizing our population. That is the need that we need now, at the moment, and it is crucial to receive it. Every weapon that Ukraine has received went through big pain, and you know that we were able and capable to use it, and that is why we do not understand why our international partners does not allow us, because we as a country are sticking to the international norms, and we are fighting with the rules of engagement, and we are telling them that we are going to hit the military targets, not to allow to terrorize our population. What else? Air defense is very crucial. For us, the missile program is very crucial to protect our population, critical national infrastructure, and our brigades, the army. So the ammunition is very important, but all the capabilities that our partners are able and capable to provide now is much more important, because whatever needed is needed now, not later. Thank you.
Так, і Ле Фігаро. Останнє питання, будь ласка.
Доброго дня. У мене питання щодо ситуації в Курській області. Поки що Москва не відповідає.
I have a question on the situation in Kursk Oblast. Before that, there was a matter of Green Corridor raised. Do you know the number of civilians left on the territory currently controlled by the Ukrainian forces? And will there be a humanitarian corridor to evacuate people from the Kursk Oblast to Russia or Ukraine? We've never prevented anyone from going somewhere. Everyone willing to go is free to. We are providing humanitarian aid. We have military administration set up. The situation is stabilized. We assist in line with all the international norms and standards. Thank you. Thank you for being short. And we have with us online Commander-in-Chief of Ukraine, Alexander Syrsky. Question to him about last happenings on the frontline situation around Pokrovsk in Kursk Oblast of the Russian Federation. Dear General, the floor is yours. Dear participants, congratulate you. Glad to see you. As of today, the operational and strategic situation is complex. The total front line we are defending is about 2,000 kilometers. On a daily basis, our defenders have to fend off about 140 attacks. In the last 24 hours, we had to fend off 170 of them. The core efforts of the enemy are focused on the Donetsk Oblast with an unchanged objective of going to the borders of this oblast. They have majority and missiles in artillery shares. Pokrovsk direction is very hot. Kupiansk, Kramatorsk, Donetsk are also very important points. Some reduction in the activities are located to certain their forces being relocated to Kursk Oblast. The enemy tries to restore the positions near Robotyne, and they try to work over the delta of the Dnipro River. The intensity of artillery fire remains very high. They use guided bombs. They have considerable numbers of strike drones, FPV type. 1,400 of such drones being used roughly on a daily basis. They continue dealing strikes against our peaceful residents and critical infrastructure. Our defense forces do their best to prevent the enemy from advancing further into our country. We take every measure to reduce their advancement potential, hitting positions of the enemy troops, the personnel hubs, the equipment hubs. We also strike important military targets on the territory of the Russian Federation. The Ukrainian forces deal huge losses to the Russian invaders. We continue with our offensive in the Kursk direction, and we have some successes there. Mr. Sersky, just to clarify, what is really happening in the Pokrovsk area? More detail, if possible. The situation around Pokrovsk is rather complex. In the past weeks, we've been seeing more than 50 skirmishes every 24 hours. The enemy is actively using its dominance in equipment and military force. They're actively using aviation, armored equipment, and the offensive activities is done with lots of infantrymen. The enemy tries to sever the line between Pokrovsk and Konstantinovka, but the price they're paying is extremely high. Our defense forces do everything to stop the advancement. Every day, this direction sees up to 300 enemy being killed or taken out of action. We work on our defense line in spite of all the complexity of the situation. We are in full control of it, and the commander is doing everything to stabilize the situation. Okay, two short questions. CNN, USA, and... But please...
Thank you very much. Could you please tell us about the impact of the Kursk operation on the Pokrovsk sectors? We just came back from there and saw the situation getting worse and worse, and many of your soldiers there are telling us that they're outmanned and outgunned, and they're wondering why would you be sending material and people into Russia when you have your own fire to put down in Pokrovsk? Thank you.
So once again, the question was about Покровськ and people there, locals. Yeah? Okay. І вплив Курську.
Не почув першу частину питання.
Ну, тобто вплив Курську на Покровськ, і наскільки я почув теж правильно.
This is about the impact of Kursk operation on Pokrovsk and the local.
Ви знаєте, одне із завдань
проведення наступальної операції. Some of the tasks with offensive in the Kursk direction. Some of the objectives were exactly to entice enemy forces from Pokrovsk, Kurakhova directions to there. And the enemy doesn't understand that. Because of that, they try focusing their core efforts exactly on the Pokrovsk area, where they concentrated some of the most fit-to-fight regiments. The Kursk operation initially distracted some of the forces to there, but at this moment, we can say that about 130,000 of the servicemen were sent to the Kursk direction, and the number is growing. Parallel to that, the enemy does its best not to take their own forces from other directions, from the Pokrovsk elsewhere. But our servicemen do everything to ensure safety of the local population. There are very hard fightings going on a daily basis there. This is the area that has our special attention, and we also are focusing our forces there. And this has always been done to defend our peaceful residents. Thank you, Anne. Обозреватель. Dear Alexander, simple yet completely different question. Could you give us more detail about Kursk direction, what the situation is there? If there are successes there, could you give us more on it? Well, thank you. Just let me go back to the conditions of having this operation. I think you know and remember it that every day the Russian Federation was shelling our borderline residential areas from exactly Kursk Oblast area. We had casualties, wounded from other civilians. We had lots of facilities destroyed. And the enemy further amassed a huge number of their troops, and they were planning an offensive exactly there. So we need to have a security zone there to prevent any incursion from the Russian Federation and protect people and cities, towns in this area. Because of that, we started this operation in the Kursk direction. As of today, we continue moving ahead, dealing palpable damage to Russian military force. 1,294 square kilometers we have under our control at the moment, with more than 100 residential areas there. We were able to get a lot of POWs from them. For ours, we call it exchange fund. 294 servicemen of the Russian Federation, to be exact. The enemy tries getting troops from other directions to the area, further debilitating their positions elsewhere. They intend to create a circle, a defensive circle around our fencing core They try planning some counter-offensive, but our active measures prevent this from happening. Our further actions will depend on how operational situation develops. Thank you, dear General, and we have to wrap up because we are 20 minutes past our schedule. We thank the Commander-in-Chief, Mr. Syrski, for his involvement. We thank all the participants, those who were here with us, Parliament Chair, Head of the Presidential Office, Minister of Defense, Cabinet Chair. We are going to have a brief recess. Thank you.